Shalom Rabbi Shlomo.
Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe.
Good. 12:38. We're right on time. Chassidish time. Yeah, it's gewaltig. The air in the country this weekend is gewaltig, tremendous. Last couple of days, chilly at night, but beautiful.
Yeah,
during
it was beautiful at night.
Yeah, it's what we call in Colorado real mountain air. In Colorado, in the middle of summer, you get this kind of you get the kind of chilly nights. Even though it's like 70, 80 in the day, the night always cools down because the mountain air comes in. All right, let's wait just another minute. See if we got anybody else coming on with us, and then we'll start. Kol Yisrael yesh lam cherek l'olam avos shenemar ba'amech kulam tzadikim l'olam yesh ha'aretz neitzim ha'torah mas yad l'spor. So this week we're up to the sixth parak, which is Kinyan HaTorah, which is, as we know, is really all brisa. It wasn't part of review, and also it's Mishnayos. But according to the cheshbon of the weeks, first of all, from Pesach to Shavuos, they needed six, and besides that the whole purpose of Pirkei Avos is to teach us the value of Torah. So therefore, they put together the brises, starting from Rameir and on, the brises of Kinyan HaTorah, of acquiring Torah. So they made this shot to Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Cherek L'Olam Haba, is every person has a chelik. There's a portion waiting for you, but we got to make the Kinyan. Without making the Kinyan, it's there, but it don't do nothing unless you learn it. I was just reading this last week's Hamadiyah has a whole article on the stipler. I don't know if you saw it. In the community, it has a beautiful, beautiful write-up of the stipler's Hasmoda and the force of his Torah. And he talks about that. He says, that you have to, if Torah is acquired if you learn it. If you don't learn it, the chelik is not there. So we're up to we got the last time we got up to in Perek Vav last cycle to the sixth Mishnah Vav. G'dol Torah Yosem min Akuna min Malchus. Shamalchus neged b'shleishim ma'alos v'Akuna b'esrim b'arba. To become a melech, there are 30 qualifications that qualify a person to be a melech, but Kahuna requires 24 miles. By Torah, Nikna is Barbar Mishmoin Advarim. But in order to acquire Torah, it takes 48 steps. And then Mishnah starts going through all of the different 48 steps. Okay, we got Dr. Ben is now joining.
Boy, it took me almost 10 minutes to sign in today.
Oh, really? No, I just thought you were on Chassidish time.
Okay.
Okay. Let me turn it back to get this back. Okay. There we go. And Arya is there watching diligently. Okay. So the Mishnah in Perek Shishi Mishnah above goes through the 48 steps for acquiring Torah. And the first is B'Talmud, to learn, B'Shmiras Ozen, to listen, Ba'arichas Sfasayim, you have to say it out loud. B'Vinas Halev, you have to move your lips. B'Vinas Halev, you have to understand it. B'Em B'Yer B'Nov B'Simcha B'Tahara, B'Shimush Chachama B'Dikta Chaverim, you have to choose your friends, B'Pilpul Al Talmidim, and to get B'Yishuv, and to learn with Talmidim with a settled mind. B'Mikra B'Mishnah, B'Yat Torah, B'Mishnah, B'Miyat Schara, B'Miyat Derech B'Miyat Tanug, B'Miyat Chena, by resisting, being attracted by the the pleasures of the world, the small, less enjoyment. Miyat Chena, sleep, giving up from sleep. B'Miyat Sicha, not to minimize outside irrelevant, frivolous conversation. B'Miyat Tzchaik, with the minimizing frivolity. Be'er chapayim, being patient, slow to anger, b'leiv tov, b'munat chacham, b'kabbalas yisurim, trusting chachamim and accepting upon yourself suffering. Amakias mekayim, to recognize your place. V'samech v'chelka v'ois v'siyag l'dvorov. Ve'ein l'machzir tevel asma, he doesn't take credit for himself. Ohuv. I'm going to quickly do this, but there's so much good, beautiful Torah on this one Mishnah. I couldn't even cover it. I didn't cover a fraction of some good stuff that says on this. To love people and to love Hashem, to love to give tzedakah, to love people who are straight or straight thoughts, to accept admonition, to love it, and to cover it for distancing from honor, not to be so strong about how you're learning, not to be happy when you have to determine a halacha for somebody, to carry the burden together with a friend, to always judge a person to the side of favor, and to help somebody to a friend to come to truth, or oneself, to establish the peacefulness, to be settled in the learning, to listen, to answer, to ask and to answer, to listen, and to add information, knowledge. It's just students who can help their Rebbe become even more wise. And from this we'll learn that whoever says something in somebody else's name brings a geula to the world. Shenemar, as we said, Mordecai. And so the questions on this, the dikdukim on this Mishnah are great. First of all, it says the first step of the 48 is b'talmud, to learn. Of course, if you don't learn, you don't get any place else. So we kind of tell you how does that make sense? And then the other kasha is on the very end of all of these is Shem Amri, and it's the only one of the 48 which gives an explanation for it. How do you know? How do you know that this is one of the 48? Because we know that whoever saying B'Shem Amri may be gula item because we learned from Esther. Okay, why is that the last one, or why is that the only one of all 48 that the Mishnah explains where it comes from? So the first one is obvious. You don't learn, you don't know. And the question is the last one. Why is that the last one? Why is that the only one that comes with an explanation? So I saw in Dov Freeman's parish on Pirkei Avos a number of really beautiful thoughts. So let me just close the door so I can concentrate. What? Okay. Baruch Hashem. That Reb Shol Brach in his Sefer Parish on Pirkei Avos, he says learning Torah is different than any other science or knowledge in the world. Every other science in the world depends on a person's intellectual capacity and the ability to reason and to delve into the depth of study, to learn to acquire knowledge in specific areas. He says learning Torah does not necessarily depend upon a person's intellectual capacity. People who are willing to spend the time to learn Torah, even if their intellectual capacity, Torah is learned with siyata d'shmaya. What a person knows and a person acquires in Torah is a matana from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he says, so it's possible that he says that a person can learn for 10 hours a day, and 2 hours a day they would go on wasting time, and they're not kind of Torah because they're just wasting time. They're not taking the Torah seriously for the 2 hours a day. On the other hand, you have somebody who is, as they say, learns 60 minutes of every hour that they're learning, that they're not wasting the time, but they're learning it with a love for the Torah, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends the Torah to somebody who loves to learn Torah. And therefore, even people, as we've talked about before, even people who would not, we would not have expected to achieve greatness, but their hasmod and their dedication to learning Torah may turn them into Gedolei Yisrael. I saw it. I saw Chaverim of mine that you thought that these Chaverim, these guys are gonna make it to the top, and those guys, what are they gonna be, right? And at this point, I can look back and see that was the folly of youth, and the ones who really achieved greatness were the people who dedication to Torah and to chinuch and to establish yeshivas achieved tremendous godless. So we understand that that's why he says, but Talmud, the first kinyan of Torah is, are you ready to sit and learn? Yeah, you have to, and to learn with Yerushalayim, to learn with Avos Torah. This is Reb Shol Brach's pshat in the Mishnah. Because the pasuk says, there's a pasuk, Yiddish, Torah matana lireov. Torah is a matana. So who do you give a matana to? You give a matana to somebody who appreciates the gift. So I just want to tell you that I've used this mashal, especially when talking to girls in seminary. But it says I've talked to the groups of women as well, because everybody's talking about, they want to talk about why women have to cover their hair. And in today's world, it's a big nisayon. It's a really big nisayon. In fact, it's one of the single big nisayons for Balas Shuvas specifically, but it's an nisayon even from girls who they spent their entire teenage years looking pretty, and then comes the chasana, and they got to put on, as they call it, a shmata. Right? So that's one of the questions. I told them, I want to give you a story, tell you a story. The story is half true. I'm telling you right out that the story is half true, because the story about the person is true. The particular events I molded to fit the emotional. And I asked him if it's all right if I can mold the story to fit the emotional. And he said, yeah, absolutely. You can use my name. You can use this. When we grew up in Denver, one of our good friends was Rabbi Yankiv Feder. Rabbi Yankiv Feder was, we were chaverim, we grew up together. He went to yeshiva. We spent Bein Zmanim. We spent many Bein Zmanim together. We didn't learn the same yeshiva, but we were always close. Our parents were close. Our families were close. He went on after yeshiva. He came back to Denver, and he went to the jewelry business, and he became a moil. He became, at the one time, the only frum moil, there was an older frum moil who was a doctor, Dr. Werner Prenzler. He was the moil for the whole city. He was a doctor, he was a medical doctor. So the Frei Olam accepted him, but that he would always be medically appropriate. He was also a yeki, so that helped. So he was moil for many years, but as he got old and he realized he couldn't, so he asked him if he could learn to be a moil, and became the moil for the city. And I have to say, 20, 30 years, Rabbi Yankiv Feder was the moil for the entire city. Reform, conservative, he was the moil. He was also he is a very sweet person. He's a geshmak about tefillah, and he's a type of person that made people feel good in his participating in their events. He would always speak. He was a very geshmak guy. He is a very geshmak guy. But his jewelry business was his real parnasa. You can't make a living off of being a moil, especially not in Denver, Colorado. So he opened a jewelry business. It was called J. Federer's Jewelers, which became, so like the people who would have their simchas, so they would come to him and they would buy their wedding bands and and for years, the relationship between him and the people in Kiehl was a very, very loving relationship. Okay. It was a very, very loving relationship. So after many years, he had his store in downtown Denver, and they turned that whole street, 16th Avenue, into pedestrian mall. And his store was on the pedestrian mall. Everybody knew you parked a block away and you walked to the mall and went to the store. One day at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, between 5 and 6, when he was about to close the store, an old friend walked in, and he told him, Rabbi Yankiv, I want to give you a present. We've been friends for 30 years. You were the model for my children, my grandchildren. We bought all our wedding gifts and our anniversary gifts and the jewelry, etc. Over all these years. You've always been somebody who I felt close to. I have something that I want to give to somebody who would appreciate it, and I know that you're the only person I know that will appreciate this gift. And so I want to accept it as a token of our friendship. I want to give you this gift. Please don't open it now. I'm going to leave. You're about to close the store anyway. So please accept this as a gift, a token of 30 years of friendship and simchas. So my friend Rabbi Yankiv, after my run, the staff had already gone home. He was about to close up the safe. He sees a small box. He opens the box. Inside is a 4-carat perfect diamond. For a jeweler to see a 4-carat perfect diamond, he looked at it, he turned it to his loop and turned it. It was gorgeous. He was just, and this is a gift, this is not a gift that was a small thing. The person gave a large diamond, perfect diamond, beautiful, beautiful. He was so excited. He ran out onto the mall, grabbed the first person that he saw in the mall and said, look at this beautiful diamond. Look at this beautiful diamond. The guy looks at him and says, hey man, I don't even know your name. Why are you bothering me? He said, that looks to me like another piece of glass. And turned around and walked away. Yankee said, he took the gift, he put the box, put it into the safe, closed the safe, and went home and forgot about it for months. Why? What happened? A minute before, he was so excited about having received a tremendously beautiful gift. And all of a sudden, it's all gone. Put it away. Didn't want to even think about it for months. What was it? Because he shared something beautiful with somebody who could not appreciate it. The diamond didn't lose a penny of value. The same diamond, same beautiful diamond, didn't lose a penny of its value. What was the difference? He shared it with somebody who has no appreciation for it. So I tell women, you have to know the most beautiful creation in the world is Chava. She was the last of all of the steps of creation, and Bria Shemayim Ba'aretz. The finishing touch of all of creation. Therefore, the beauty that HaKadosh Baruch Hu poured into Chava, which goes to all of her descendants, is a beauty that's tremendously gorgeous. It's the perfect. Who are you going to share it with? Share it with somebody who doesn't appreciate it. Somebody who you walk by on the street will look at it and not see the beauty. He said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave women a matana, hair, different than men, right? Men, we wear a beard, it's a whole big deal. Right? For women, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, hair products for women. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested in women a tremendous amount of beauty. Who are you going to share it with? So we know the Chazal tell us that that the time and the place and the person to share a woman's beauty is between a husband and wife in the most closest of relationships. We go around sharing it with other people who have no appreciation for it, we lose the value of that beauty. So I thought about that. I thought about this story. I've told it many times. That when we talk about when it starts with Pirkei Avos, and he starts with Eloheinu b'Talmud, b'Shmias ha'ozen, b'Arichas v'Sayim, b'Binas halev, b'Eim b'Yira b'Nova b'Simcha b'Tahara, we come to a recognition that Torah is enormously beautiful if we learn it and appreciate it and we put it into its right place perspective. If we don't treat it with callousness, we will lose the appreciation. The Torah doesn't lose a penny of its value. But for the person who doesn't show that they appreciate the Torah, it's worth nothing. It becomes trash. And we saw we don't see it so much, but so we do see a little bit today. Well, there's these quasi Torah institutions who teach Torah along with all sorts of Deus Chosvos. And they want to say, this is the way Torah could be interpreted, read it, this you can make exceptions. And they make Torah billig, make Torah cheap. And there's no chiddush that Gedolei Yisrael don't come from that. Where will Torah? And so I was really impressed. The last speech that we heard when we were all together by the Siyum Mashas, was Rabban Reichs. Words we were on the way out, but we were listening to it as we were heading out. And he said, you got to come daven in yeshiva. When you hear the cries of Jungelite, B'nai Torah, when they're saying Ahava Soilam, in the morning, they're saying B'libeinu Bina Lahav and Lahaska Lishmoya Luma and Lama Lishmoya, and they're saying it B'demoy Sholosh, begging Hashem should give them the ability to be able to learn Torah. Luma Lama Lishmoya Lasas. And I listened to that. I said, that's a beautiful thought. I know Halabai, that when we daven, that we should talk about appreciating. And then my own additional thought was when we say Birchas Hashach in the morning, right? We say do it again. Right? That's the lotion. And I thought about once I was saying Birchas Hashachar, and I said, why does it say B'tagilenu? Why does it say Tagilenu b'Sarasach v'Dabkenu b'Sarasach? Why does it say V'Dabkenu b'Tarasach v'Tagilenu b'Sarasach? Why that's what? And I realized that Tagilenu, that we should become accustomed. If we're talking about become accustomed to mitzvahs, meaning we're doing mitzvahs out of road, doing them because we're rugged. We're doing them regularly. We're doing them out of road. We do mitzvahs out of road. We lose the value of the mitzvah. Torah, we become accustomed to learning Torah, then Torah becomes something that was always in our mind and always upon our thoughts. On the other hand, what we want to get out of mitzvah is deikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we do mitzvahs, not out of Hegel, we do mitzvahs out of wanting to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the mitzvah becomes very special. So I thought I'd give some of the thoughts on the very first of the 48 Dvarim that Torah is niknas b'hem. For the first several of them, but I saw in some beautiful thoughts and some interesting stories. Because it says also it's one of the 48 Bemunas Chacham v'Kabbalas HaYisurim. Okay, we understand Bemunas Chacham is a necessary step for learning Torah. We have to trust our Gedolei Yisrael. But Kabbalas Yisurim, we have to accept upon ourselves Yisurim. Yes, are they connected? So they said that the Tana, the Mishnah, or the Brayos that put together had a special purpose in putting them together. And it says one time there was a Nasa D'Rub Zechon L'Bracha was sitting at Shalosh Shudas, and it happened to be that there was another person sitting there who started knocking other Rebbes. Started, belittling other Rebbes. And Nasa D'Rub got very upset. He said, you have to know that in order to learn Torah, you have to be ready to Mekabel Yisurim in Amunas Chachamim. There are times when some may be painful to accept something that we hear about Gedolei Yisrael, and or their opinions or their psacholocha, and we want to discount it. He says, "Besser zu schweigen," because it says Amunas Chachamim v'Kabbalas Yisurim. Sometimes you have to be ready to suffer, even when even when you're not so happy about your personal opinion of Gedolei Yisrael. So he says, and then there's this, he brings a couple of interesting ma'ases. There was a Yid in the time of the Rosh Hashanah, there was a Yid in a town whose minhag every day was to put together a couple of prutas into his Meir Baal Nes Pishka. So Kach Kibbel Meir, if you put it in Pishka, you give tzedakah every day to Meir Baal Nes, you ask, you get what you need to say every day, unwavering, for many years. Built up, quite a bit of money in the Pishka. So he said, okay, you have to empty the Pishka already. So he asked around where do you give money for a Meir Baal Nes? So somebody said, oh, good, we'll send the Gaboim. They sent the Gaboim for Meir Baal Nes, the Kupas for Meir Baal Nes, to this man's house. And he said, hey, what are you talking about? Who are you? He said, we're the Gaboim for the Meir Baal Nes. He said, no. My father told me you got to give the tzedakah to Meir Baal Nes. And if you're not a Meir Baal Nes, I don't trust you. I'm only going to give the tzedakah to Meir Baal Nes. No matter what they tried to explain to him, they couldn't convince him. The Rav was a young man, and he passed by this town. They told him, listen, we got a problem. There's a man sitting with a fortune in tzedakah to give her Meir Baal Nes, and he insists that he gives it only personally to Meir Baal Nes. He says, not a problem. Takes a friend with him. He says, come with me. I have the answer. Come knocks on person. He says, I happen to be Meir Baal Nes' son-in-law. And my father-in-law sent me to pick up the money from you. He says, oh, so wonderful. So please send your father-in-law my best regards. I've been saving up this pictures of many that we've had in our family. And he gave him over the whole pishka. Brilliant. That was brilliant, right? But why didn't you tell him you're a Meir Baal Nes? Why did you have to tell him you're a Meir Baal Nes' son-in-law? He said, listen, this man is following the minhag of his father, who told him that he has to give tzedakah to Meir Baal Nes every day. So they've been giving it for years. In his mind, Meir Baal Nes is a man with a long white beard. Right? He said, I knew if I would come to Meir Baal Nes, I'm too young. But if he believed me that I'm a Meir Baal Nes' son-in-law, so therefore he said it's very good. Give regards to my father-in-law. And he gave me the pishka. Right? Emunas Chachamim. Then he tells another verse. These are cute stories. That there was a Yid who the minhag was to drink 4 kaisos, arba kaisos on Pesach or Seder, beer. Shecher, he used to ferment and make beer, and he has minhag. He has his father, they have family, they make arba kaisos on beer. And people heard about that. They could, they told you, what are you doing? This chametz. This chametz. You're not allowed to drink beer on Pesach. It's chametz gomer. So it happened to be that the Rabbi Shesarov was passing by, and he heard that this man that was so stubborn, he insisted on making arba kaisos on chametz. So he went to him. He says, listen, I'm telling you. He says, you're making a mistake, and I'll prove it to you. He says, yeah, he says, yeah, how do you prove it? He says, the bracha you make on b'dikas chametz. What's the bracha you make? Beer chametz. Because in Yiddish, the beer chametz meant, he said, the bracha is, beer chametz, you got to get that the beer is chametz. I said, you're absolutely right. I made a mistake and stopped drinking beer on Pesach. Again, these type of things which Rabbi Tzurul was famous for his cleverness, was about Emunas Chachamim, and it comes with Kabbalah Yisurim. So there's a number of essential masses, but one thought on the last of the 48 qualifications we talked about. Which is, as we said, is an unusual. The language of it is unusual, and why is it the last one? So he brings us to, let me just get the language right. So the basis for the Ger Rebbe asked his father about this Mishnah. he said, what's so great? What's so great about what Esther did? He says, if a person is learning Torah, teaching Torah, and doesn't say something over b'shem Amra, so doesn't give it to put it into, and doesn't give credit to the person who taught him that piece of Torah, it's like a gazlan. You're stealing somebody else's piece of Torah. He says, stealing somebody else's piece of Torah is not nice. So what's the greatness that Esther gave over b'shem Amra? She did what was appropriate. Why is that maybe Geula L'Olam? Why is that given the credit for giving Geula? Because of she's over b'shem Amra, therefore everything came out. The Torah is called Yisrael. See, so the Imre Emes, the Ger Rebbe's father, answered him. He says, we are taught, the Chacham tell us in Gemara, that what was revealed to specific Nevi'im, Nevuah, was given to all the Nevi'im of the generation. It was that Nevuah was given to this Navi, but other Nevi'im had access to the same Nevuah. So they would actually verify each other. Yes, that's true Nevuah, because we also saw the Nevuah, and we know that it was that Nevuah was given to that person. So the Nevi'im Acherim, the Nevi'im of the generation, knew that the Navi Emes was giving over true Nevi'us. He says that Esther had the same Nevuah. She had the very same Nevuah that Mordecai had. Except that Mordecai did not know that she was such a big Nevi'ah, and that she had the Nevuah that she has to give over this piece of news to because Bixam Viserys, when they were plotting to kill Mordecai, yes, there's all medrash that Mordecai knew their language, and he had a whole thing that they had different watches. He says it was all Nevuah. When Mordecai received the information from Bixam Viserys, was a shtickle Nevuah, was a piece of Nevuah. He was told, see what's happening over here, this is something you have to pay attention to. Esther had the same Nevuah. Esther knew the Bixam Viserys were plotting, and Esther had no obligation to tell Achashverosh that Mordecai had the same Nevuah. But since she saw that Mordecai had the same Nevuah, and she gave over the Nevuah b'shem, the shame of the person who received the Nevuah, that's already maybe Geula L'Olam. So therefore the chiddush that the Imre Emes said, he said, we take it with the Kinyan Torah, is that when we see that a piece of Torah comes from somebody else, and we say it b'shem Amri, we're giving over the credit to a shtickle Torah, which every piece of Torah is a shtickle Nevi'us, and we're saying, you see this piece of Torah, that person was the one who received the piece of Torah, and I can verify that that's true. That's maybe Geula L'Olam. That's what brings Geula L'Olam. The beautiful thought. We are at the process in the next 30 days, standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and putting ourselves into Shuva Elai v'Shuva Aleichem. We are turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, we're ready to return. So therefore you can say v'Shuva Aleichem. And therefore we can be able to say at that point, we come before, Ani l'doidi v'doidi li, I am to my doidi, therefore doidi li. The most important thing that we can do during these 30 days, besides davening, is learning Torah. Because in the limud Torah that we do during these 30 days, if we're learning the halachas, if we're learning the musa, the hadrach of Chazal, on how to approach the Sefer Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, the Sefer Musa, we are verifying that really what we wanted a whole year was we really wanted to learn Torah. We really wanted to have that special connection with Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Yitzhahara, but the Tirchas, as we said at the beginning, Talmud Torah. Our dedication is to Shara Kadosh Baruch Hu. We really want to be able to have Torah in our lives. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu should give us all of the opportunities to take Kinyan Torah. We can't always do it. We are overwhelmed and overburdened and distracted constantly. But during these next 30 days, he's saying Te'elim, Davar Shamorit, Kiyah Shofar, and learning Torah, even the Torah of the parish Hamilas of davening, is something with which we shall Kadosh Baruch Hu. You see, this is what I want a whole year. I can't do it a whole year, but for these few weeks, I'm showing the Baruch Shalom. This is what I want. I want the Kinyan HaTorah. We'll be zeicha that this will be beginning. This sixth parak always comes in the next 3 weeks, which we learn 2 parakim a week. If Pirkei Avos in order to be Messiah, Pirkei Avos again before Rosh Hashanah these are the weeks of Kinyan Torah. We'll be zeicha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we will show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Torah is really the value that we want, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say, Shuva Elai, Shuva Alechem, and the Baruch Hashem will take us back and lift us up out of the depths of this galus, and whatever is going on in the world, it's the Torah that is the shmir for Klal Yisrael. Hashem Yishmar says that Tzeisenu B'Yeinu, we'll be zeicha to Torah and with Torah Eretz Yisrael, and we'll be zeicha to see the Gula Shnei B'Kar. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll be zeicha to a true Kinyan of Torah.
Amen. Yeshikoyach Rebbe, good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rebbe. Good Shabbos.
Amen, Rebbe. Shkach.
Shabbos, Rebbe.